Welcome back to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Andrew Griffiths. Now, for the last 25 years, Andrew Griffiths has been travelling the world, inspiring entrepreneurs and business owners with his unique style of street smart wisdom and advice. We could all do with a little bit more of that. He is officially Australia's #1 small business author, having written 14 best-selling books. Wow. Which have all been translated into languages as diverse as Chinese, Indonesian, Estonian, and Nigerian. Andrew has also delivered over 1,000 presentations, sharing his gift for engaging and motivating business owners through his powerful storytelling style. Add to this his own 40-year history as a business owner and entrepreneur, and it's easy to see why he is considered by many to be the godfather of small business in a really positive light. Welcome, Andrew.
Well, maybe with a few dark undertones. I don't mind a little bit of fear emanating out and some sinister music playing in the background. I can live with that, Ingrid. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to talking to you on your podcast show for a while. So thank you. I really appreciate the invitation.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to the conversation, actually. Now, entrepreneur, author, speaker, each of these roles requires you to be an excellent communicator. What has your life journey so far taught you about the keys to communicating in a way that truly connects with others?
Such a great question, isn't it? I fell in love and started to appreciate communication many years ago, and really I was one of those cool kids that did Toastmasters. Yeah, you know the ones. Yep. And but I really got the communication bug when I was teaching people how to dive. Literally, my first business was a dive shop, and I had to teach people, and I was a kid. I was 17, and I had the kind of kid's view to that as well, where it was really more probably about chasing girls and having a good time and rah. But then I bought a business and realised, well, hang on, all of a sudden I needed to take this more seriously. And I realised that if I wanted to teach people how to dive and make sure that they were safe, I had to be a little bit smarter about how I communicated. I had to take communication more seriously. And I started to really become a student of communication way back then, and that's become a lifelong journey for me, whether it be written or spoken or whatever it was, and that wonderful ability to be able to communicate deeply and engage people. And I think two things that have been so effective for me. The first is to be deeply empathetic with people and really put yourself in their shoes, and such a great tool for so many things. And related to that, but also I think standalone, is the ability to listen. And in a world now today, of course, everyone wants to be heard, yet it's probably harder to be heard than ever. So empathy and developing my skills to talk less, listen more, have really been powerful life changes for me.
It's interesting that it started with diving and needing to actually be responsible for making sure that people were safe. And that's been the thread that's kind of, followed you throughout your career. Yeah,
it was interesting. One of the things I think that all of a sudden, when for anyone who hasn't perhaps done a dive course or whatever it is, if you hold your breath and you come up to the surface, you can burst your lungs, which is not good, right? That's not good. That's bad. And it seems like such a silly little simple thing, but people can panic or whatever it might be. There can be that reason. And I think one day I would almost use that as a passing line. Don't hold your breath when you're coming up, and not really think about it, but the ramification of it really, like, this is really important. And I would almost have it as a throwaway line as opposed to, hey, you need to do this. And I learned how to manipulate people with language. Like, one of the things that we would do, and I had a great instructor who trained me, his name was Robin Hood, and he was 4 foot tall, 5 foot wide, an ex-Vietnam veteran. And
Come on, it wasn't really his name.
his real name was Robin Hood, and I tell you, he's not the guy who would have worn Sherwood Green pantyhose at any stage, and he was just tough, ex-Vietnam vet, muscle man, rah rah, and he really instilled in me, the importance of this stuff. But I remember he said, "There's one word that you use to control all of your students, and that word is shark." And he said, if you want to get people to pay attention, you want to get people back on time. So when you're doing the theory, you say, okay, guys, after morning tea, we're going to talk about that one thing that you all want to know about, sharks. Everyone is in the room 15 minutes before it's due to start, full attention. And of course, you don't talk about sharks. Oh, we've run out of time, folks. After lunch, 1 o'clock, we're going to talk about sharks. And they soon cottoned on, of course. But I fell in love even more then with this concept of communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of your ability, as a speaker in particular, but also, I've got one of your books right here, as an author, is the art of storytelling. Do you think we've lost the art of storytelling in business? And by that, what I mean is, in particular, have CEOs lost the art of storytelling to inspire their people?
I think they did, and it's really interesting that you mentioned CEOs in particular, for a lot of different reasons. I think we went through a period there where it felt almost like storytelling was a little bit twee. It's a little bit. It's not that serious. It should be about data. You should get up as a CEO and it should be about the P&L, balance sheets, what we're doing about increasing profitability, shareholder returns, all of that kind of stuff. And a few years back, I actually did a specialised speaker training 2-day event, and that was just for CEOs, and it was just to teach them how to storytell. And the feedback, why that evolved, and I think it was like 30 or 40 CEOs from mining companies, aviation businesses, all kinds of roles, male, female. And the reason that they were all doing it was exactly this point. They said, it's not enough to just get up and, people can read an annual report. People can read what your dividend is going to be, but we need to be able to tell the story of this business. We need to tell the story of this industry. We need to be able to tell the story of us, of our people, of where we're going, that aspirational future. Doing that with numbers is just, we're the same as everyone else. How do we differentiate? We differentiate through story. Yes. And that's what I've started to see in the last probably 10 years. The rise again of story is probably how I would look at it.
That's very exciting, actually, because I think that when we think about a CEO and the customers that a CEO has, or the different stakeholders that a CEO really needs to engage in order to give them a really accurate level of understanding of the context of the situation, of potential outcomes if certain decisions are made. It's obvious to me that storytelling is a critical component of it. And yet, as you said, for the longest time, it's just been data-driven, information-led, and the assumption, I guess, that goes with that is that people will be able to pick it up. But what were some of the gems of that program, without obviously giving it but what were some of the gems that those CEOs took from that program that really started to change the way that they communicated with their companies when they went back?
I think it was really interesting to do that, because you know what it's like too, with a room full of CEOs, everyone's guarded, right? And it's the loneliest role in the world, in my view, being a CEO. And it was kind of a strange concept in reality too, to have 40 CEOs in the one room, which they got to learn about storytelling and get up and share stories and do all of that stuff. Once they got beyond that and they let their guards down and realised, okay, what goes on here stays here, that kind of stuff. It was really interesting for them to start to to understand they'd self-nominated. They all had their views about story and why they were there. But what was really powerful for me was to showcase the different stories, the range of stories, and how they could use stories strategically, not just, a little Mary had a lamb kind of story. It was that ability to say, how do you tell the story about, a supply chain? And the fact that, our supply chains need to be more responsible. Now, we can all get up and say that. Beige, boring. But what about we tell? I remember seeing the managing director of Minolta talk about their investigation into their supply chain. Oh my God, you'd write an amazing book about this. The realization about, and the story that he told was around, he wasn't at this thing, but I've seen him present on this. It was like, we patted ourselves on the back about, we're environmental and sustainable. We do, because we take responsibility for the stuff once all the bits arrive at our lovely Minolta factory in Germany, in Japan, and all the rest of it. What happened before, not our problem, not our concern, until we started to look at it and go, hang on, it is our concern. There is slavery, there is environmental, horrible stuff going on. There is so much there, and he tells a story about going upstream in the supply chain that ultimately led to Minolta saying, we have to take responsibility for the supply chain from end of life of the product all the way up to, the stuff getting dug out of the earth. And that's a great story that telling that just with data is there's no personal. Here's Lily. She's 7 years old and she spends 14 hours in a hole in the ground digging out lithium.
Yes.
For a battery. You go, okay, wow. So not all stories are good, but, and that was a story in that instance of we need to be better. And this is how we've done that. So I think, sorry, Ingrid, that was a bit of a long answer there, but I think that the lights went on with all of these CEOs about stories are amazingly powerful strategic tools if we use them really effectively. And also the big story that most of them don't want to share, of course, is their story.
Yeah.
And that, which, as you know, most people don't want to share their own story. It's the hardest story to share. But to understand how important it is for everyone, their team, their shareholders, their customers, etc., to understand the man or the woman behind that role. And when they started to say, well, there's lots of different stories, great. You can share them in different ways. They can have different outcomes. But people want to know who they're doing business with these days. We want more than, you being the CEO of a big public company tells us 5% of the story. What is the rest? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? Where do you come from? Where did you grow up? What's your beginning? What's your overcoming adversity story? What's your, what are all of those things? And it was fabulous for me to see this room of really interesting and engaged CEOs kind of go, wow, I get it. I've got to share my story, even if I don't want to. But there's all these other places where we need to incorporate storytelling, from middle management to frontline to training warehouse people to teaching, the people on the haul pack trucks in the mine site. Yeah. Big stuff, really big stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think in storytelling, when people recognise themselves in some of the characters that you're talking about in those stories, even if it's the person themselves, then all of a sudden, there's that common ground. Then all of a sudden there's a connection. All of a sudden there's the emotion, that ties people together. And then you feel like this is somebody I've already got an emotional investment in.
That's right. That connection is there. I mean, when I'm doing speaker training, Ingrid, one of the parts of the framework that I use is, you say who you are today, but this next part is you've got to say where you come from. And, if I'm talking to a room full of small business owners, the first part of it is, I bought my first business when I was 17. And the room full of business owners this guy understands it. And I use a bit of a standard liner. I say, I bought this business. It was amazingly successful from day one, right? Yeah, right. Of course, it was a disaster. I had no idea. I slept in the dive shop because I couldn't put money in the truck for petrol. I knew my bank manager because every day he'd pop by and give me the checks that I'd bounced the day before, and all of that stuff. And I illustrate how that started to create that connection. As opposed to I'd get up on stage and I meet in front of 300 people and say, "Oh my God, so hard to park a Lamborghini in this city." Do you realise how difficult it is? I couldn't find a spot for my Lambo, and they wanted to charge me $100 to park it. The connection, is just, and I see speakers doing that faux pas all the time, Ingrid, and I go, you just don't understand what creating connection is and rapport and, those kind of elements, being used well. But story again has that ability all throughout a presentation or whatever it might be of just changing that emotional connection or the sales process or whatever it might be that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about for salespeople? I mean, it seems obvious, doesn't it? I mean, we talk about CEOs, being able to be better storytellers because of the different stakeholders that they, engage with and bringing people on a journey and so forth. It's kind of easy if you're a small business owner, you come with a story, the story of your own business, the foundation story, what led you to starting that business. But if you're a salesperson, what's the role of storytelling from your perspective, Andrew, that you think that they could be doing better?
I think there's actually a step before the salesperson. I think it's whoever is managing the salespeople needs to be great at storytelling as well, because I think that if they're great at sharing stories about products, services, the business, etc., I think it kind of flows on, and that's where if the CEO is great at storytelling, then the C-suite become great at, then it flows down the line. And I think that it's almost like in the sales role, whatever that sales role might be, that the salespeople almost need to be given permission to tell story, because we dive a little bit too quickly into, detail, product, price, advantage, all those kind of elements. And I mean, I'm old school in terms of training. For me, sales was first and most important thing is to find out, ask smart questions and find out exactly what your client wants, what their challenges are, pain points, all of those kind of elements. And then being able to craft the story, around your suggestion or being able to craft the story around, I had a client just like you, Ingrid, 2 weeks ago. She came in, she wanted this and she really wasn't quite sure which pathway to go down. So, we had a long conversation. We really identified that the number one need for this particular item was this. So, we're now leading into it. We're not talking about the customer. We're talking about, someone who came in a few weeks ago. And we all, go, okay, someone else said there's social proof. There's, it's more emotive than a, the widget kind of concept, etc. So I think asking great questions, learning more, being able to craft your story response where applicable, that also then suits the customer is a real kind of key to this. And I think that salespeople can often not appreciate that story is probably their greatest sales tool if used really effectively. Now, if you can combine story with product knowledge, I think that's such a formidable amalgam, because it's not just a story without detail. It can be a story with really substantial information in there as well, such as the story I was kind of sharing there, when I can add more detail to why you chose that, the benefits and the reason, and now where you're at with that. You came by and said, oh my God, that was the best recommendation ever. That story does all of the heavy lifting for you then as a salesperson. And so that's the key. But often salespeople, I feel, under a bit of pressure to purely focus around product. That's a couch. It's got, 6 legs. It's got 12 cushions. It's pink. And you kind of go, really? I think consumers are a lot smarter these days. We know that. We know that lawyers sell law. We know that accountants sell tax. We know that furniture stores sell furniture. It's very rare that I go somewhere and go, wow, what an awesome sales approach. I had it when I bought a car. I remember buying a car a few years back, and it was a really funny story around this because I lent a friend of mine my car, and he'd written it off, and so I literally
That wasn't funny.
that wasn't funny, but he didn't, he wasn't seriously injured, which at the time I was a bit, I was sad that he wasn't, but of course I'm glad that he wasn't, but anyway, semi glad,
Yeah.
But so it was a Saturday morning, and I was going from car yard to car yard in Cairns at the time, and it was really interesting because the front page of the paper that day, what was a front page story was the automotive industry in Queensland is dead. People aren't buying cars, and I'm literally going from car yard to car yard, standing around waiting for someone to come and serve me. And I think I had a check at the time for 50 grand in my pocket to buy a new car, and the best I could get is some guy threw a brochure at me while they're all huddling around talking about the fact that no one's buying cars. And it was like, wow, where do I go? So I went and they're all in a line, that car yard, that car yard, that car yard. No one would sell me a car. It was kind of hilarious. And then I pulled into an Audi dealer and walked in, and it was really interesting because it was out of my price range at the time, and I didn't want to spend that much money on a car. And I remember that the guy came up to me, and Scott was his name, and he introduced himself, and he said, and he asked me a question, so what do you need a car for? And it was like, well, to drive around. And he goes, no, how do you use your car? And he started this conversation that lasted for 2 hours of grilling me about what do I drive distance? What do you do for work? I'm an author, so you've got prestige. You need to... Anyway, it's like it was in Midnight Express. I felt like, wow, I've never been that. I didn't know that so many things that I needed to know about having a car before. Anyway, quite literally, finished, and he said, I'm going to show you the car that I think is ideal for you. Took me downstairs, showed me an $80,000 car, which I bought on the spot, because it was illogical not to. Yeah. Because he literally said, you said you need that room, you carry that, you don't do yep. And I'd go, what about that one? Too small to carry, people around how you, or to, and I'm going, oh, okay, yeah, well, can't have that one. And it was literally, I drove out that afternoon with an $80,000 car and happy as Larry. And it was driving past all the show yards where the other car guys are still standing around crying in their coffee about the demise of the automotive industry. That was probably the best sales experience I've ever had. And I still think about it. You look back, that was a long time ago, and I still feel so fondly about that experience. Oh my God, I spent 35 grand more. And it was the best experience I think I've ever had. Yeah. Isn't that a sign of a great salesperson?
Yeah, that sure is. I mean, I just, I love everything about that whole experience. I mean, it's not funny, but that's actually, pretty true for these days, I would say, that a lot of people are lamenting, how tough it is. And yet there's customers everywhere that are screaming out for that kind of experience that you've just had, where somebody is able to really be completely engaged in the conversation, really understanding a lot more about you and why you came in today looking for a car, how it's going to be used, and then using your own words. It's hard to argue with yourself.
It's impossible, isn't it?
As your reasons for why this particular car, $30,000 more than you intended to spend on the spot, and you're still talking about the experience today.
Yeah, absolutely. And still so fondly talking about, what a great experience it was. The guy basically got me to spend double. And, and it's right. How rare is that an experience for us, though? Yeah. These days, and that really again is that. It's funny too, Ingrid. Tell me to stop talking at any stage. But I did an event on last Friday at the Sofitel Hotel in Melbourne, and it was really interesting there again. I do a lot of events at different places, my own events as well as others. And, it's hard to find a good event. It's always seems to be a venue. It's always problematic and this, and we can't, all the things we can't do.
Yeah.
And I just saw this venue in such an amazing light. The lady that I was dealing with, she wanted to show me some other rooms. So at lunchtime, I said, yeah, fantastic. I'd love to see them. And she took me around to these other rooms that were in the hotel that I'd seen online, but I didn't buy because I didn't think they would work. And she showed me to these other rooms in the property, and she explained, imagine if you had a room here, imagine if you had you could have all of your tables there for breakout stuff. We could have 2 boardroom, small tables here overlooking the Yarra. And I go, we can do that. Let's do that. And it was like, it was so, rather than, here's an open room, stand there for 5 minutes while we both look at an open room. She'd really intelligent thought, because she'd seen my event in the morning and realised what we do, and then went, how could you apply that up here? You could put a small stage there and have people stand there and deliver their presentations, a speaker training thing. And I went, oh, she's good. And I will use them time and time again because of, she told me a story about how to use those rooms.
Yeah.
That was so compelling that, again, how do I say no to that?
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. I mean, one of the things that, I talk to my clients about is building what I call a sales asset register. And within that should be a range of customer stories, that anyone can use. Because if you're new to a team, you're new to a company, it's really hard to have, it takes time to build your own bank of customer stories that you can kind of draw from, and create that world of possibility that somebody else can relate to, through customers. You can use your old bank, but there's nothing quite like, the current one. But when you're borrowing from others in the business, even others in your team, because you've got that bank of stories, then it makes it really, really important and, really powerful for salespeople to be able to use stories in those sorts of situations, because you do need to create a future reality for customers, because it's not just about the problem that they've got at the moment, it's about the solution to that problem and getting them to imagine what that future solution could be like.
Absolutely. And that's why story has to be all the way through an organisation, doesn't it? It's no good if the CEO is sharing a story, but because there's stories along the way that are relevant to each part, whether it be operations or HR or every part of the organisation has great story. Yet we're rarely encouraged for story to be a part of either our training or our narrative that we communicate. Like, imagine if every department, your role is to come up with one great story to use for in our resource pool once a week. Whether it's an experience, an interaction, something we bugger up, and we learn from. They're not all happy stories. Yeah. I think that there's just great opportunity in that for really smart organisations.
Absolutely. Now, you're helping me at the moment write my book. You're my coach in that instance. And I would say that you've really helped me find my voice in that. What can you share with the listeners about the importance of finding their voices, to their businesses, the importance of that to their people, especially those that they serve within their businesses?
It's another great question, Ingrid. I think that because even though we're inherently biological, natural as speakers, a lot of us and majority of us have probably had that, not beaten out of us, but kind of beaten out of us. In Australia, don't tell stories about yourself. Don't talk about yourself. In Australia, you go to America, there's no shortage of people that are prepared to tell you about themselves.
Right.
Australia, it's one of the biggest issues that I have with speaker training, for example, is getting people to share their story, and they go, I feel so uncomfortable about that. Even as an author, kind of, trying to say, well, you're the authority in there. It's got to come from you. So the challenge is often that people feel that they've got to become someone else when they tell the story. I've got to become the author to write that, or I've got to be that kind of speaker. And realistically, the key with story, in my view, is that we should get out of there when you're telling stories and get down to there.
Right.
And if we can do that, whether you're writing a story, telling a story, it doesn't really make any difference. If you're on a stage, well, how I tell a story here on your podcast is exactly how I would tell a story on stage.
Wow.
Or exactly how I would write a story as well. And that's, I would write it literally like I'm sitting here talking to you, you
Yes.
know, in that really sincere, just authentic way, and add enough detail so that the story makes more sense.
Yes.
I think that's a really important piece, because we try to visualize, even for me using that car yard story, if I was taking a little bit more time, I would really describe, that car yard next to that one, to that one, to that one, to the guy coming out to meet me in a suit, and I'm in a pair of daggy shorts and t-shirt, and because you don't want to look too wealthy when you're going to buy a new car, right?
That's what they say. Yeah.
That's what they say, which is, you end up buying a more expensive car than you planned. Who'd do that? So I think that the key is to get comfortable with sharing our stories, and not the shoulds, and not the, what will people think. And we start to notice that difference. And I really noticed that as a speaker, Ingrid, where I really didn't value storytelling when I started out, because I thought people want data, information. I've got an hour, pack in as much as I can in an hour, and fill their heads. And that is value. Today, 60 minutes, I'll tell 25 stories, and I'll have 7 small bits of data that I'm sharing, the stories that illustrate to paint that. So really, we've just got to start sharing stories. We've got to start, getting comfortable in our environments. If you're in a training situation, sales training, is all story in so many ways, right? Being able to kind of share those, but then also getting people to share back. Yes. Getting your sales people maybe to share a story about an interaction that you had with a client, and then seeing how they, how do they feel about that. And like anything, I think it's a skill that we develop and we get better at over time. Yes. And I've noticed, I've focused on it. I've got much better at storytelling because I slow it down. I add the detail. I make sure it's relevant for the conversation. I try and pull out the point of the story at the end of it. Those little things. And I'll tell a short story as much as I would tell a long story. Yeah.
I really appreciate what you're saying there, about the relevance of the story to the person that you're speaking with. And that was something that was a game changer for me in working with you, was to really think about, well, who are you talking to here?
Yeah, right.
I found myself writing all sorts of, that was kind of like I was writing an article rather than, who am I actually having a conversation with as I'm writing this? And that was really key for me.
Great.
One of the things that I think is connected here to having a voice and being able to have an authentic voice is that connection then to purpose. And in the Sales Revolution, I talk about, having purpose as being able to serve, the customers that we have, whether that be an internal customer or an external customer. And I call it having customer consciousness.
Love that.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful.
What do you see as the connection between finding one's voice and connecting to purpose?
That's such a big point, isn't it? Because I think if you go back to those CEOs that did that training program with me, I think that for many of them, the initiality of that was, we need to be able to tell better stories because our board have probably told us that we need to be better at telling story. That's probably why many of them were there, to give themselves a competitive edge as a CEO in that, highly kind of difficult world of, securing your next job. And they started to notice great CEOs who were great storytellers were getting promotions ahead of them, because they were better spokespeople for their organisation. So their motivation for being there might have been a little bit different to what they ended up realising. And I think that that from those people, that when they were saying, well, actually, this is what I'm passionate about and I have the ability to be able to talk about this. Our organisation's purpose is this, but mine is this. And at the moment, that they align, and that's great. There's that kind of, the lights go on a bit, and it's like if you want to ask someone, to share a story about their dog that they love dearly, they'll talk for hours. You want to ask them about their latest Excel spreadsheet. There are people out there that'll, talk for hours. But when we go, well, my purpose, the thing that I'm so driven about, and it's the serving element, we start to serve our audience, not our ego. And that's when we go, bang. It's like, I use a line, Ingrid, and this will sound a little bit arrogant, but bear with me. I became a great speaker when I stopped trying to be one.
Oh, God, I love that.
And you know exactly what I mean, in that when all of a sudden, when I got on stage, it wasn't about me. It was no longer about me. I've got one purpose, and that is to help the people in front of me, whether it be in their business, whether it be through some personal development, whatever it was that I was talking about, whether it's a room full of 40 new leaders or 100 crusty CEOs.
Yeah.
I'm there to serve. And I think that we can often feel that's a little bit kumbaya-ish. I don't feel it is. I think that when I'm here to help the audience, and I stop getting concerned about the technical perfection and remembering everything word for word, and all of that technically important stuff. And I went, you know what? I am here to serve, and I'm going to help these people. And it's my mantra that I find some quiet time before I get on stage, and I get so excited about getting on stage because I want to help these people, and I'm driven then to do that. I don't need anyone to come up and say, Andrew, that was amazing. I don't need any of that stuff anymore. I did when I was starting out. My ego needed it. I served my ego more than I served the audience.
Right.
And when I had that shift, and I became far more authentic. I became so much more genuine. I became less worried about I forget what I'm talking about on stage all the time and laugh about it and go, you need to hear this story now. I don't know why, but it's important. We'll work it out as we're sharing it together. Yeah. And it's like, whereas before, I would never do that. I'd be so tightly bound about, and point number 1 is, and point number 2 is, and point number 3 is, and point number 4. Point number 29 is, and these poor people in front of you are going, oh, for the love of God, just tell us a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I feel that when we start, excuse me, when we start coming at this from a bit of a higher level and going, well, this is my purpose overall, but my purpose also today, excuse me, that's when we start becoming extraordinary storyteller. That's when our authenticity shows. That's when we move people. That's when we engage people, whether they're our staff, our audience, our customers. Look at Eve, from Patagonia. Like, he's just one long purpose-driven message.
Yes.
And you kind of go, I just adore him. I just want to, I want to be him when I grow up. And you kind of go, I just watched their 50th birthday, video, and it's just one of pure purpose and story. Purpose and story.
Yeah.
Just all it is. For a minute, bang, 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 bang. And in the end, we've given our company to planet Earth because that is the only thing that matters. And you go, oh, God. Like, okay, drop the mic and just, call it a day. Just amazing.
Absolutely magnificent.
I'm not sure if I answered your question there, but I said a lot of words.
Well, do you know what? I don't even care because I love what you said. I mean, I'm going to pull out 2 quotes there. The first one was, we start to serve our audience, not our ego, and I just thought that's magnificent. And I became a great speaker when I stopped trying to be one. I just thought, gosh, there's just so much about that really says, I'm committing what I call ego-side. I'm getting myself out of the way in order to completely be there for the other, to really be there to serve. And I can only do that when it becomes less about me and all about the other. And that's a really beautiful space to be in. And that's where I think we can be, completely present.
Yeah, I agree. And there was actually quite a profound moment for me when that happened, actually, Ingrid, as well, because I noticed that at the end of a presentation, I would often want that accolade at the end. My ego, the cup needed to be filled.
Yeah.
And I just reached a day where someone came up to me at the end and said, Andrew, that was a great presentation. And I went, okay, something feels different here. And I went, thank you, that was lovely. And I went, normally, fill the cup. And all of a sudden it was like, well, actually, there's nowhere to put that. And then someone else came up and I went, okay, what's going on here? It was a very physical moment for me, Ingrid. And I went, oh my God, I don't need that compliment. And that was it. It was as profound as that, a line in the sand. From that day on, my cup was full. My whatever my brokenness was and my, upbringing and all of that, with issues with self-worth and value and not being enough, I had enough feedback from people to say that, yep, you have great value. And it was like, oh, okay. Now I can get on with it. It was a very, very big, and I was in South Australia. I remember in Adelaide presenting an event. It was such a profound moment for me. I literally went upstairs to my room going, oh, something must be, I wonder if I've got cancer. What's wrong with, you go straight to doom.
Yeah.
It's important that you dive straight into,
Something must be wrong.
Yeah, something must be, I'm clearly broken. Something is broken that I can't take a compliment. I don't need a compliment anymore. That's it.
Yes.
God.
Yeah, that's a very different place to be giving from as well, I think.
I think so too.
When you're coming from a full cup, then that's when you really can be there, because you don't need to be filled anymore. It's all about, you completely clear about what your value is, which leads me on to my final question before we go. Now, this is a book that I absolutely loved reading, and this is, your book, Someone Has to Be the Most Expensive. Why not make it you? The fundamental principle in that book is about knowing your value. Now, as we've just talked about, even somebody with as much experience in the speaking space as you, it took what it took until you reached a point where you went, oh my God, hang on a minute. Yes, everything's okay. I don't need the external validation anymore. It's coming from within. That's different. It's profound. You even remember the place and time when you had that realization for you. To those listening who have a direct relationship with customers, what would you say is important about delivering value and at the same time communicating the value that you're able to bring to the other?
There's a few things that I obviously do. I talk about this a lot these days. The first one is, I think that we often don't really realise the value we bring. I think we look at it quite one-dimensionally, as value for money, which is the least of reasons why people value us. And I think that we've got to have this really tight connection with customer proximity. We've got to be very close to our customers to understand why they buy from us. And if it's any of the lower mean stuff, convenience, cost, etc., then you haven't really got those customers. They just, that they might be buying from you today, but there's no loyalty, no, etc. And those customers refer more of their non-loyal, tight-ass kind of customers. So that's not kind of what we want. The other customers who are diehard fans, I find that the reason that they're diehard fans of us, whatever our business may be, and more often than not the reasons that we realise, and whilst of course quality has to be in there, but it's often about the energy that you bring to the interaction, the fact that you might be fun to do business with. In a world where someone who really values fun, that Chinese quote, man without a smile should never open a shop,
Right.
It could be, again, your unique experience or expertise, that plays. There's so many different ways that we can be valued, and we've got to really understand, like, why do our top clients, customers buy from us? And it's rarely the reason that we think that it is. And that's why we have these conversations about products and services, instead of conversations about value. So we need to be able to have bigger conversations with our best customers to find out what is it that really makes you buy from us.
Yeah.
But most importantly, it's like, what is most important to them? And
Yes.
it's the value alignment. It's even something for me that I've really noticed over the years, Ingrid, is my not-for-profit persuasions. The people that have done business with me because of my not-for-profit work, they say we share the same values. That's why I'll buy from you. Now, that's not on my brochure that I do good and protect wombats and do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we want to do business with aligned values. It's why people, Christian businesses, I got a website developer. The only reason I use him is because he's Christian.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not Christian, and but my view is he must be a good guy.
Right.
Because no one religious has ever done anything bad before, Ingrid.
I don't think there's anything in the history.
No history that would lead to... And he is a great guy, and he is lovely, and he used to be a youth pastor. And I go, this guy just oozes good.
Yes.
And I like that value kind of set, and it's like, interesting. So we've got to understand values a lot more and understand how people value us. I think the second thing, though, is values are changing so rapidly. What we really value today, COVID comes along, we might value something differently. And it might be the fact that you stayed open and you pivoted, for the dreaded P word, it comes out. But we really appreciate that you stuck with us during COVID. We're going to stick with you, and so I think we have to adapt and evolve the value concept a lot more and quickly as a reflection of the time that we're in. And the key to that is, we've got to understand our customers. And if we do it really well and we're really deeply valued, I ask all my clients in conferences, I ask a question, would your customers fight to save your business? It's a big, big question. And that says a lot about a business if people would be rallying in the streets to save your business. And we do that by tightness of customer proximity, keeping our customers close. And the problem at the moment is there's a whole lot of ways that we can be really distant from our customers, but kind of feel like we're being close when we're not. And that I see as one of the great risks of understanding value, staying relevant. And relevance is purely value when you think about it. If we lose value to the client, we lose relevance to the client. They'll find something else that is more of value to them at the time. And so I think we're in this big war for relevance, and half the time I think many businesses don't even realise they're in a war for relevance. Not for a competitor to sell their stuff, but all of a sudden for people to buy that instead of that. So we've got to be having bigger conversations about value, how we're valued, how we need to be valued, how we have to evolve our value, all of those parts of that, and the stories that we need to then tell around our value. Because if we're going, and I say this all the time, we're valued because we've been around for 30 years. You go, that's a really nice kind of piece if all of your clients are baby boomers. But if you're dealing with anyone under the age of 55, they don't really care. Certainly if you're dealing with anyone under the age of 30, if your only value piece is that you've been around for a long time, do you want to do business with a company that's been around for 30 years or the latest, greatest, just launched startup? Most people are going to be leaning towards the startup. It's something exciting, something new, and that's, again, this whole value conversation. It's a big conversation.
It's a huge conversation, actually, I think, Andrew, because it's about, I think, also not just being somebody that, changes with the breeze, so not being inauthentic about, I think people like this now, so we'll kind of highlight that angle, or we'll do this. There's a real art, isn't there? From, you talked about the journey from the head to the heart before. You talked about, the importance of it being, of communicating our value and knowing our value and being values led. You talked about understanding all of that within the context of what's most important to the customer, which is relevance, because you can have a really valuable product or service, but unless it's, well, what I think is, unless it's really meeting the customer's number one or number two challenges or number one or number two goals, it kind of like, oh, well, I'll have to keep that in mind for whenever we might get to that in the future, and in the drawer it goes.
Yeah.
It's not because they don't value it. It's not because they don't like you. It's not because they don't think that, the offer's good or interesting or curious, or it's the latest, or it's the most trusted because it's been in the... It's just not relevant to me right now. It's not going to help me get to where I need to get to. Mm-hmm. And so you talk about, storytelling around all of that. I mean, there's just so much that we can be doing as business owners, as sales leaders, as CEOs, as salespeople to be doing a better job at communicating our value to the other.
Absolutely. And I think the moral to the story for me is really simple. Tell more stories. but tell more strategic stories. Tell stories for a purpose. Use your stories to, from a speaking point of view, you and I will get on a stage, we share a story. Why are we sharing that story? And I think you've got to start there. If I'm in a sales role, why am I sharing that story? I know when I've been in sales roles, I've had my banker stories and I pull them out when I think, I've got to show credibility here at this point. I've got to show, our customers are all 90-year-old. They won't work on your boat. We specialise in taking 90-year-old customers out. It's like, rah. Yeah. Again, I get the feeling you and I could maybe talk about this for about 3 or 4 weeks non-stop.
We absolutely could. And as much as I'd love to, I know that we both have to shoot. But Andrew, would you come back another time?
Yeah, I would love to, Ingrid. Maybe I come back and we talk about your new book.
Oh, if we have to.
Look, spoken like a true author. Now, if it was me and it was a new book, there'd be these subliminal images of the book going across the screen. I'd have a T-shirt on with the new book cover, tattoo on my forehead. Right. It's like, come on, Ingrid, you got to up your game here on this shameless self-promotion.
Right. Well, I'll know for next time. And that's fantastic. Listen, thanks so much again. I really appreciate your time.
It's such a pleasure, Ingrid. I love you dearly, and it's so great to have an opportunity to be able to talk about all of this. It was a really great conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you've been listening to The Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard. And to find out how the Sales Doctor can help your organisation to transform its revenue, growth and profit, please email me at ingrid@thesalesdoctor.com.au. Visit us on our website at www.thesalesdoctor.com.au. I look forward to your company next episode. Bye for now.